Hello, thank you for joining me. As a lot of you know, I've been doing a series of podcasts about Game of Thrones Season 8. So we're trying something new today, where I'm going to give a little bit of instant analysis as a preview for my upcoming podcast about Episode 4, which will be coming out next week. If you want to follow all the podcasts, you can check them out at writeyourscreenplay.com/GOT. So let's talk about season 8, episode 4. It's a challenging episode, right? Because we've just come out of the most epic battle sequence that you've ever seen in Game of Thrones history, right? We've just had the fight that we've been waiting for in episode 3 between the living and the dead. And now somehow you've got to get that engine started again. You've got to create a journey again that people are going to pay attention to and connect to and care about. And it's hard because we're all feeling a little bit let down because where the hell are we going to go from here? How do you get that exciting again? And there are going to be a couple of spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to plug your ears. But there's one really exciting sequence in episode 4. Which is the moment we are watching the armies split apart on their way for the final battle that we've been waiting for. And we are watching Daenerys fly on Dragonback, as we've seen her do, while Jon goes by land. We split these two apart so we can worry about what's going to happen with them separate. And suddenly we see a giant spear pierce one of her dragons. And then another, and we watch that dragon crash into the water. And that is a terrifying and shocking moment, probably the most powerful moment in this episode from an action point of view. We also have a pretty powerful relationship moment that happens in this episode between Jaime and Brienne. There's been a love story brewing between these two for a really long time. And as we know, Jaime is in love with his sister, has been in love with his sister for a long time. And this is his first chance at a pure love, at a love with a good person, and to become a different kind of person. And so we have those two things happening at the same time. We have this journey with Daenerys, who is going to fly off with her dragons to take the Iron Throne, only to have one of her dragons slain. And then we have this emotionally powerful story that's happening between Jaime and Brienne, which is really asking the question of, can Jaime ever move on from Cersei? Can Jaime actually become a different person than he's been before? So these are both very powerful elements to build around. And at the same time, we're having a problem right now if you watch Daenerys. Which is you probably don't like her, which is interesting, right? Why are we able to watch Walter White on Breaking Bad break bad, and we love him and care about him and feel connected to him? But here's Daenerys, who we have felt connected to for 8 seasons, and we're watching her break bad, and we're not connected. At least I'm not. We're not liking her. We're not rooting for her as she breaks bad. And so I want to talk about why. I want to talk about what causes this problem. And the reason why is actually a spiritual reason, which is that what you want your characters to do and what they're actually ready to do are not necessarily the same thing. The writers have figured out that they need a badass hook for this episode of Game of Thrones, or this season of Game of Thrones, that they've got to keep things interesting. And with two good guys like Jon and Daenerys fighting on the same team, it's not going to be very exciting. It's kind of like if you're making an Avengers movie, right? You got to get the Avengers fighting against each other, because if the Avengers are fighting somebody else, it's no fun. They're too damn strong. They've got to be fighting themselves in order to have drama. So the idea of, well, what if Daenerys were to break bad? What if Daenerys was not to be a strong leader in this season? What if Jon is the true heir to the throne? It's actually a really great idea, but I think we can probably agree that it's not totally working. And it's not totally working because we're not enjoying Daenerys Breaking Bad. And the reason we're not enjoying it is because it is not growing out of her character. We have watched Daenerys for 8 seasons hold on to her morality in the face of much stronger ethical questions than these. We have watched Daenerys remain the good guy in the face of so many options to hold on to her power. We have seen her go to war for a bunch of slaves to become the breaker of chains, right? We have seen her hold on to her integrity no matter what. So the first reason that we're not really connecting to the new bad Daenerys is that we don't believe it, because Daenerys isn't bad. Daenerys is good and has been good. So the first thing that's happening is we're feeling the hand of the writer push her. We're feeling the character change. Now let me contrast that with Jaime. Jaime in the first season is one of the worst people you've ever met. He throws a child off of a wall. He's sleeping with his sister. He's murdered the king he was supposed to protect. He's the worst guy ever. And over many seasons, we've actually watched him change. But we believe his change. We're rooting for his change. We're hoping that Jaime becomes a better person. So why does Jaime's change work and Daenerys' change doesn't? You don't just get to choose that your character changes. You have to force them to change. And the change can't happen in here. The change has to happen on the screen. And this is a way that writing a screenplay or a teleplay is much different than writing a novel. In a novel, your character can change in their head. Just like in life, oftentimes our thoughts change us. We are acting a certain way and then we think and think and think and we dream on it and we meditate on it and we journal about it and we go, oh my God, I've got to make a change. I've got to do something different. So for many of us, our changes happen internally. But in movies, when we're writing movies, when we're writing television, our job is to externalize the internal, to take the emotional thing that's happening on the outside and create scenes on the outside, scenes between characters, events, plot, structure, things that push the character and force them to change. If you think about Jaime's arc over these 8 seasons, we can see the events that have pushed him to try to become a better man. And we've seen how those events all add up to that moment where he decides to form a new love with Brienne. And we also understand why he leaves Brienne, even though we wish that he didn't. We actually understand what shaped that in him. And it's why that moment where he tells Brienne who he really is and what he's really done is so powerful, because we've seen him over these last 3 episodes wrestle with it, with what he did to Bran. Now, I don't think that moment works perfectly, and I'll get into exactly why when I do my longer podcast about this episode. But I don't think that is they got the most bang for the buck out of that, because I think they're rushing a little bit. But all that stuff felt character motivated. It all felt structurally to have integrity. It all felt like it was growing from the character. And so sometimes what happens is what you want the character to do and what the character actually wants to do are just plain not the same thing. They're just not doing what you want. And when this happens, you have 2 different choices. Choice number 1 is you can go, okay, well, let me just follow the character. And oftentimes, if you follow the character, you will find that the character is really willing to do much more interesting things than you're trying to force them to do. One of our mottos at the studio is, I write the truth. And I write the truth doesn't mean the literal truth, but it does mean the emotional truth. It does mean that your writing needs to be connected. So if you're feeling like your writing is disconnected, if you feel like the puppeteer is puppeting your character through your writing, the chances are that you're not going to write those kinds of compelling scenes that you're trying to write. You're not going to write those kinds of compelling journeys that you're trying to create. So you want to find a way to do this that feels like it has integrity, that feels like it's coming naturally from you. And the easiest way to do that, especially if you are still learning, if your craft is still developing, the easiest way to do that is just to trust your characters. Just to keep torturing them, just to keep making things harder for them. If they're flying across the sky, shoot one of their dragons. Let the worst thing happen all the time, unexpectedly, and your character will naturally change and naturally go on a really powerful journey. And so that's the easiest way to do it. If you're an intuitive writer and if you're still developing your craft, don't try to push your character to where you think they need to go. Instead, let them push you. Just keep them making new choices that you believe are true. Keep on putting them in new, ironic situations that you believe are true, and they're going to take you somewhere really cool. The other way to do it is to look at the plot events you've created and to remember that plot is not actually that important. That the only purpose of plot is to push characters towards change. And that's true in your life too. All writers and all people confuse plot and structure. But plot and structure are not the same thing. Plot is the crap that happens to happen to you in your life, just like plot is the crap that happens to happen to your characters. And the truth of the matter is you have very little control over plot, and all plot is kind of boring. That really the only thing that matters is what choice you make in relation to whatever plot just happened. So sometimes you're walking down the street and a piano falls out of the sky and it lands on you. And honestly, that plot doesn't matter. What matters is what choice do you make? So Bran gets thrown off of a wall in episode 1. And then he starts making choices that transform him into a different being. And we believe those choices because we're watching them happen in front of us, because the writers have externalized the internal. And all those choices are brought into focus in this episode when Bran is presented with the option to be a ruler, and he doesn't want it anymore. So that's an organic way of building it. So plot is there to push the character to change. Another character who goes through the same stuff, like Daenerys, decides she wants to be the ruler, that she needs to have the power. So the structure is crap happened. The plot is crap happened. The structure is the different kinds of choices that different characters make in relation to that plot. And for your plot and your structure to ring true, to work together, they have to come from here. They have to come from your heart. You have to feel connected as you write them. You have to actually believe that it's true yourself. The problem that's happening with Daenerys in season 8, the reason that you are probably disconnecting from her a bit, at least the reason that I am, is that we don't actually believe her choices. And the reason we don't believe her choices is because nothing is forcing her to break bad. If you actually look at the structure of season 8, it's hard to pinpoint that moment that the breaking bad began. It's almost like we got to the end of last season and everything seemed like it was fine. And we get to the beginning of this season and we're meeting a different person. And all that change happened internally. It didn't happen on the outside. We didn't actually get to see it. We get to see the effects of it, but we can't pinpoint the moment. So this is what's cool about plot. All the time when you have a problem like this, because I believe this season of Game of Thrones actually has a structural problem with Daenerys. When you have a structural problem in your script and you're a new writer, usually your instinct is, oh my God, I got to throw it all out. I got to change everything. And this is rarely true. Rather, you need to look at your plot and go, okay, out of what I created, what's good? what's strong, what felt truthful, what's interesting. And you want to start to think, how could I use this plot to move the character along in a journey? How can I use this plot to actually change the character? And this is the level 2 way of doing it, okay? This is much more advanced. This is not just following your instincts. This is allowing your heart and your head to work together to create a journey. So how does this work? Well, look at the moments they have. The real problem that they have is that they're missing a moment called the inciting incident. They're missing the moment that starts Daenerys' breaking bad. And the reason they're missing that moment is because they start trying to break her bad before anything's happened that would make her break bad. We can contrast this to Walter White. If we look at Walter White in the first season of Breaking Bad, we know exactly why he's breaking bad. We know that he has cancer. We know that this is changing his life. We know that he feels like he can't provide for his family. We know how he finds out about this new way of doing it. And the truth is, Game of Thrones has all the plot necessary to believably move Daenerys to a point where we would believe that she's broken bad. What is missing is the value of that, because the change starts way too early. Think instead what would happen if we watched Daenerys at the beginning of this season and she was the same person that we met at the end of last season. What if we met a woman who was good? What if we met a woman who was trying to hold on to her integrity, trying to hold on to her goodness? But things keep happening that keep on chipping away at that integrity. First, she comes to Winterfell, and she is used to being welcomed with open arms and love, right? Everyone who has met Daenerys has either seen her as a dangerous enemy that they wanted to kill, or as a great liberator that they believed in. Everyone from Tyrion and Littlefinger to the Unsullied, she is used to being loved and appreciated. Even all the way to Jon Snow, who bends the knee to her. And here she comes to Winterfell, and nobody likes her. Everybody hates her. Now, the problem is she's already changing. But what we really want to watch is we want to try to watch her try to hold on to her integrity in the face of all these people who hate her for no reason, even though she's come to save them, even though she stepped away from her own war to try to defeat the undead, even though they need her dragons. We need to feel the ingratitude chipping away rather than the change happening in advance. Then she loses Jorah. Then she finds out that Jon actually has claim to the throne. And she instantly turns into a bad guy. Now, her whole journey has been that she is meant to be the heir to the throne. It's based on this bloodline idea. So wouldn't it be more interesting, watch her wrestle with the idea as a woman who we have met and understood as a person with integrity, to watch her wrestle with the idea that maybe it's meant to be Jon. Wouldn't it be interesting right now in this episode to watch what happens in the previous episode? We watched Jorah die. And in this episode, she basically tells Jon that she never loved Jorah like she loved him. But the truth is, we've actually seen something different. We actually know how much she loved Jorah. Wouldn't it be more interesting and more complicated for her to admit to Jon how much she loved Jorah, how complicated and confused she is? In this episode, we watch Littlefinger, who we know to be manipulative and always thinking long-term, never thinking about the short-term personal sacrifices. We watch Littlefinger make the argument that killing a bunch of people to take the Iron Throne is wrong and a terrible, terrible mistake. But the truth is, that doesn't seem like Littlefinger at all. It seems like Littlefinger to go, what's the most effective way to do this, and let's do it. It's more like Daenerys, who would say, No, I refuse to torch 10,000 innocent people. So what's happening is, to try to create conflict, the writers are actually switching the characters. The characters are not actually playing their role, and we're not watching the problem occur. We're not watching Daenerys's ethics get chipped away by the pain and horror of war, which of course is how tyrants are really born. Instead, we're watching the writers manipulate these characters, trying to get to that conflict. We watch in this episode, we watch Tyrion, the smartest guy in the room, make the dumbest possible choice. Everybody knows that there is absolutely no way that Cersei is going to abdicate the throne, no matter how much you ask. And we also know that Cersei wants her brother dead more than anything in the world, which is why it's not believable when Tyrion walks towards that castle and you're waiting. You're like, this is the moment that Tyrion's going to eat it. You know Cersei's going to kill him. You're already pitching that idea to yourself. But what happens is the writers actually let their foot off the pedal. They actually don't allow the worst thing to happen. And because they don't allow the worst thing to happen, yes, it's terrible that they kill Daenerys's wonderful, beloved advisor. But the worst thing hasn't actually occurred. And because the worst thing hasn't actually occurred, we're not able to watch. Imagine if Cersei had assassinated the brilliant hand behind Daenerys. Imagine if the worst had really happened. We would start to understand how Daenerys would have to break that. If we understood Daenerys as the person who's coming going, I don't want to torch these people, it would be so much more interesting to watch her react to the stacking of events. The death now of 2 dragons, the death of Jorah, the hatred of the people of Winterfell, the shocking news that maybe she's not destined for this, the death of the people that she loves around her, the betrayal of Cersei. Wouldn't it be more interesting to watch that structure develop? And so this is the idea that I want to leave you with. Structure grows out of plot, but structure is not plot. Structure grows out of the psychological truth of your character, the way you push them and push them and push them until they change. And for your structure to really land, and for your episodes to really land, you need to, any writer needs to create that stuff in a way that feels connected. It's okay if you're a very skillful writer, if your craft is very strong, it's okay to say, I want to move my character to this. But then you have to be honest with yourself. Are they actually ready to move? And if they're not, you don't just get to move them anyway. You've got to actually push them there. You've got to push them there one step at a time until you truly believe it. Or you can simply allow the characters to do it themselves. You can simply go, let me just keep pushing them until they make an interesting decision, until they do something that surprises me, until they take me to a place that I didn't expect to go. So these are your 2 choices. The only choice you don't have is the choice that Game of Thrones is making right now. You don't have the choice to puppet and manipulate your characters. Because even if you have the kind of audience that Game of Thrones has, and yes, they're going to survive the small problems that are happening in this episode. Even if you have that audience, you want the audience to connect to your character. You want the audience to shed genuine tears when your character makes a terrible mistake. You want the audience to be wishing that Daenerys could be the person she used to be, as opposed to accepting that, okay, I guess she's different this season. You want to you want to keep that 4th wall. You want your audience to imagine that these characters are real and not remind themselves that the writer is doing something. So as a writer, you kind of want to become invisible. So hopefully this was helpful to you in thinking about how to structure some of your own writing. I'm going to be releasing today Game of Thrones Episode 8, Season 3, my analysis of the Battle of Winterfell on my podcast. And actually, if you want to follow the full podcast series, we now have a page where we're going to be posting all of them. So if you go to writeyourscreenplay.com/GOT, you can see all of my podcasts on the whole Game of Thrones series, and I will be doing each episode this season. And of course, if you would like, you should come study with me. You can do it in New York City or online. I've got some really amazing classes coming up, including a class I've never taught before, which is a Write Your Screenplay Level 2 intensive here in New York City in June. And so you can come here or you can attend it online. You should check it out. My website's writeyourscreenplay.com, and you can go to writeyourscreenplay.com/GOT for more analysis of Game of Thrones.